questioning. Because I know previously when I've been really good, it's been the things I've been able to uncover in discoveries that have been really effective, and perhaps I'm not quite hitting that as much at the moment. So yeah, any tips around that? I think I gave you some context as to what my role is. It's more AE versus SDR, but obviously there is still I've got my own responsibility to create opportunities myself. But yeah, I think that questioning is where I could really do with help.
Sure. So just to make sure I understand, so these are customers that have expressed some level of interest enough to be able to take a meeting with you. And the problem you're having is that when you have the meeting, you're not converting enough of those people from meeting to deals. One, sometimes you're hearing maybe I'll think it over. Sometimes they're ghosting you. Sometimes the conversations feel like they're a little out of control. Sometimes maybe you feel like you're winging it. Is that kind of, you're not exactly sure what questions to ask and why you're asking them?
Yeah, it's even worse than that. We're getting lots of positive feedback, and they're falling in love with the concept and the products. For context, virtual healthcare is fairly new in Canada. I know you guys in the States are a lot further ahead. It's a new concept here, and people are seeing it perhaps for the first time when I'm introducing it. And it's getting it from, wow, this is something that's brilliant, and this is something that we see that is going to be everywhere in a few years, to actually, I would quite like them to buy it now, and they need to see the importance of purchasing now.
Well, let's do this. Let's role play, because I think it's the best way to learn, so that I can understand a little bit about what you're doing and identify some gaps, and then maybe we could switch roles.
Okay.
I don't need to know everything about what you sell. I know I read a little bit. It's sort of a teledoctor, right? Is that kind of what it is? Tell me a little bit about the problem that it solves.
Yeah, I'd say, have you got children yourself?
I do.
And how old are they?
One is 25 and one is 22.
Okay, so if you roll back a few years when they were younger, presumably you can go back to times when they were ill or injured fairly often, especially in the younger years. And what tended to happen when they were ill on a Wednesday morning? What would happen?
So we'd have to miss work. We'd have to take them to the doctor. We'd have to wait a long time to even hopefully get in. If we had to go to the emergency room, it was even longer. We rarely could get in the day that we needed to get in. And when we did get in, we had to sit in the waiting room. Then we had to sit in another waiting room, the waiting room for the doctor, and spend a bunch of time there. And then once the doctor prescribed the medicine, we'd have to go wait for the pharmacy, get the medicine, and then come back home. That's a hassle. That's why I didn't want to have kids. No, I'm just kidding.
Sounds like it was a hassle. And on a personal level, how did you decide whether it was you or your partner who took that role on?
Flipped a coin, man.
Flipped a coin? And it was always heads when you needed tails and vice versa, eh?
I had a double-sided coin. My wife had, she goes, God, you're the luckiest person in the world. I'm like, yeah, well, sure.
So yeah, this is the problem that we solve. We're now able to provide you access to trained medical professionals through an application or through your laptop in a matter of moments. You can get trained advice within minutes, and this is great use for you, the employee, but also as the employer, you're able to see benefits because you're helping people to stay at work and look after their health.
I have to tell you something. I have listened to literally hundreds, maybe approaching 1,000 people. When I ask them, what do you do? They typically will start to talk to me all about their thing and their technical jargon and their features and benefits. What you did very masterfully that few people do is you actually started with the number one thing people care about,
themselves,
which is the problem.
Yeah.
How are you doing things today? What's the before and what's the after? So that's a really good job. I always think of it like an infomercial, right? I don't care about your potato peeler 3000 that makes French fries if I don't make French fries. You know, if I'm struggling in the kitchen making French fries with my knife and they're soggy and they're boring and they taste terrible and my family's unhappy and my kitchen's a mess, then I'm interested in hearing about your French fry 3000, which is what you did that was really masterful, which was you started the quote unquote explanation of what you do with a question. Because unless you can relate to the problem, there's no need to talk about the solution. The solution has no value without the problem. So you did that really well, man. I can count really on one hand, maybe even less, over the course of 10 years of doing this, where people have done that. So how did you learn how to do that? Was that something you've always done? Were you taught that technique? Talk to me about it. Just curious more than anything.
Yeah, no, thanks for the feedback. It came about because I needed to go to a conference, an in-person conference, and I tend to be fairly terrified of those sort of situations. And I wanted to have in my head like what was the game plan for when it was going to happen. And I know that most people go for this is who we are, this is what we do, blah, blah, like that spiel. So I tried to find a different way of doing it, and I found it on social media somewhere. I'd have picked up the tip and spin it around and make it a story about them.
Fantastic.
And it tends to be that most people have kids, and that's one of the prevalent areas. I've got a couple of other versions, but
yeah, it's great. It's great. So awesome on that. So let's actually pretend now. So you're selling to employers.
Correct. Yeah. So we're solely B2B. So it will be typically HR leaders. If it's a smaller company, it might be a CEO, but anyone who's responsible for people, and it would be introduced as an employee benefit to the entire company.
Okay, so now we're gonna do this exercise that you just did again, but we're gonna do it a little differently because I can understand why that would make me happier as an employee potentially. But now we have to talk about an HR professional whose life is going to be made happier by other things potentially. So let's do your elevator pitch again, or your conversation, but now you're talking to an HR professional. So we have to understand the types of things, the types of problems that an HR professional might have that you can potentially solve. So how would you start the conversation if I'm an HR professional? What question might you ask in terms of, like, let's say we're at a networking event and I'm an HR professional now. How would that go?
Okay, I'd probably start with something like, would I be correct in thinking that you're fed up and tired of the phrase attracting and retaining talent?
Yeah, it's something that we're always looking to do. We're always trying to find talent, and we're always looking to keep our good people.
Yeah, and I think it's been an overused phrase. So people like yourself are fed up of hearing it from people like me, yet it remains one of, if not the most important parts of your role. So this is where we're at. What we have created is an employee benefit that is going to help attract and retain talent, because it does a few things. It ticks boxes around mental health, ticks boxes around physical health, around family time, and it does so at a relatively low cost. So for you as the HR leader, what you've got the opportunity to do, and we've actually surveyed a lot of our customers, and they've been telling us the main reason that they join Dialogue is because they see it as a great opportunity to differentiate from the competition now. And to attest to that, we've got around 6% of Canadians use virtual healthcare, whereas a recent survey said over 2/3 would actually use it if it was available to them.
Yeah. So you're right about that first statement. You know, attracting and retaining talent is just, I mean, I can't go a week without seeing that somewhere on LinkedIn. And so typically and I just want to make sure I understand this before we kind of get into the role play. Typically when you're saying things that are always being said, they get ignored, right? Because it's just like, I've heard it. So I'm wondering if, like, what you did before was pretty crispy. Hey, you got 2 kids, they ever get sick? Specifically what happened, so I wonder if there's a way to, hey, have you ever had an employee that was a rock star and this person, left the company? Has that ever happened? I wonder if there's a way to just make it a little crispier. And how, let me ask you, something a little bit, so we're not saying attract and retain talent, because I know even though we're going to be making the same point, sometimes the language really matters. So for instance, if I'm a salesperson, I'm making a cold call and I say, can I have a minute of your time? That automatically associates me with every other salesperson calling. And therefore it's just a natural reaction to sort of put up my guard. So I'm wondering if there's a different way to kind of start that conversation, but just so I understand. So HR professionals care about attracting and retaining employees. Is that how they speak? Is that the words that they use specifically, like in the inner circles with the door closed? Is that what she's worried about, or he's worried about nightly? Like, how do I get better people in here faster? How do I retain people, make sure I don't lose my A players? Is that exactly what they're saying? Or are there other, subtleties, phrases, language the ways they describe the problem.
Yeah, there's almost certainly other ways to describe it.
Like what?
People tends to be used a lot. So instead of using, I think HR is what everybody shortens human resources to, whereas a lot of the titles coming up now are like people management. Don't know if there's a way of getting that in.
Yeah. Have you ever spoken to people that have bought your product?
Have I ever spoken to
people that have bought your product and they've been using it for 30 or 40 days? Have you ever had conversations with them?
I haven't, no.
So one of the things I would highly recommend, because you've never done their job before, is to interview people that have bought the product and have been using it for 30 or 40 days. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you stop talking like what you just spoke like. Because when you say save HR professionals time and money, that feels like marketing, so to speak. It's like what you've been taught, someone taught you that. But when you interview your customers and you ask them, hey, I know you bought us 30 days ago. When were you starting to look at this? How'd you know you wanted to look at it? Like you were looking at a bunch of stuff. Like, how'd you know this was the time to do something about it? And they're going to tell you this story. Something's going to have happened. There's going to be some situations or events that are happening. And you're going to understand something very key as an AE, which is motivation. The reason people don't buy is because, I call this a scale, a desire scale. When you're an AE, if you can imagine 1 to 10, 10 being, here's my check right now today when we're on the phone. I don't even want to sign a document, like here's my check. And 1 being, I want to hang up the phone. If you can't get people on the call to an 8, 9, or 10 through a certain series of questions, that's a 3-part formula with a certain set of questions, there's no reason to actually pitch anything. There's reason to nurture them and get them off the phone so that you can get on with your day. But the biggest problem that AEs have is they start to pitch when people are at a 4 or 5 and they're like, wow, they're interested. They said they were interested. They're talking to me. But because you're not asking the right questions in the right order, in the right way, you're tending to hear things differently than how the prospect really feels. So that's the disconnect. And so we have to understand at a very deep level what could potentially be motivating them, so we know how to ask the right questions. And the best way to do that is to get closer to people that have bought so that you can understand their journey. Like, why didn't you just keep doing what you were doing? Like, why this? Why now? And they're going to start to tell you things that we're going to then be able to use in our AE conversation. So I just want to plant that seed as an action item for you. What I would suggest is to ask your boss or manager or whatever, if you could have some conversations with 2 or 3 people. And you might want to Google something called a jobs to be done interview.
Okay.
It's an interesting interview technique that allows you to understand all the events and circumstances that were going on, all the struggles, all the pain, how they got to a 9. Because in order for someone to buy your thing, they're at a 9. Because it's hard to make change. Change is hard. I got to pay for something. I got to learn something. My boss, like it's a pain in the neck. People like what they're doing. The fear of the unknown, the status quo is safe. So they got to some level of 8 or 9 or 10 when they bought you. I want to know that story. And I guarantee when you talk to them, what they're not going to say is this. Well, the reason I bought is because I wanted to attract and retain talent.
Yeah.
They're not going to say that. There's going to be some energy in their words. And what you need is that lingo. Like when I was over at Basecamp, the lingo, meaning the customer's words, were used to sell them. So the best AEs that I know and that I work with, they take what the customer told them in terms of their needs and desires and their greeds, and they take that and use it to be able to sell them. Salespeople work too hard. On a discovery call, literally you shouldn't be talking more than 15 or 20% of the time.
Yeah.
But the problem is you've heard that, but you don't exactly know what to say, when to say it, how to ask, why you're asking, what you're asking. What you need is like a framework so that you know where they are on the desire scale. Because if they're below a 4 or 5 or a 6 on the desire scale, that's awesome. You can get off the phone with them. You can put them in a nurture track and you can get back your most precious asset, which is your time.
Time. Yeah.
So let's role play it.
And just one thing on that. I've kind of done that but I think the way I've done it, I've missed the mark. So a couple months after I joined, I asked one of the most senior salesperson here to share some of his stories as to why people bought. But I've heard them from him, and I've got the underlying reasons. But as you say, I've not heard it in their own words, and I've not done the full-on interview. I didn't even interview him. I was asking him, like, the information's gold, but I think to use back, it's perhaps missed some of the nuances.
Yeah. So a big mistake people make is doing what you did. You know, there's an old game, who stole the cookie from the cookie jar?
Right.
And it was the kids in the circle. And by the time it gets to the end, it's like, what? It was so different than it was at the beginning, because
whispers.
The whispers, the translation, right? And the other big mistake people make is they don't know how to interview customers, because you can't say to someone, why did you buy? So, hey, I'll give you an example. Why did you go to Weight Watchers? Oh, I wanted to lose weight. Now, when I do my interview technique, what people end up saying, what I learn is this: man, I just got a divorce. My hair is falling out. I was fat. I wanted to meet a hot girl. She's 25 years old. And I wanted to go get ripped. Or if I'm talking to a woman, I didn't want my thighs to rub together when I put on a dress. I didn't like the way it felt. That's very different than saying, I want to lose weight. So where you at right now is the equivalent of I want to lose weight. I want to save HR professionals, attract and retain talent, time and money, more leads. Those are all things that have been fed to salespeople by some marketing department or somewhere along the way, because they're not close enough to the customer. So you have to get close to the customer, and you have to read up on the jobs to be done interview technique, which I think is in my book. And it's a very powerful technique to be able to understand the exact circumstances and events. So I'll give you an example for Jelly Vision. I was in your position, and I was told to say we save HR professionals time and money, and that wasn't going anywhere. Once I did the jobs to be done interview technique, what the HR professionals told me was this: you know, we wanted to feel less frazzled during open enrollment, and we wanted less people knocking on our doors, asking us the same questions over and over again about their freaking benefits. We were sick of answering the same. That language and that lingo is very different than save HR professionals time and money. So we'll role play this out, but you're not going to be as good as you could be until you really understand the customer's world a bit more. And because you've never done the job, most AEs haven't, it's going to be hard. So that would be step one. So let's, in the spirit of role playing, we have a few minutes. Let's go ahead and role play it. So hey, this is Josh. We're on an AE call now. We're on a discovery call. Hey, how's it going?
Am I the AE or am I the HE?
You're the AE.
I'm the AE.
Yeah, you're you. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks. How are you, Josh?
Good.
Sorry, you've completely thrown me.
Oh, so you're going to be the AE, and I'm a prospect that you booked a demo with.
Okay.
So I'm just going to make sure you're going to do your normal job, and I'm going to be the prospect.
Am I doing my new one or my improved one?
You're doing how you do it now. You're running a discovery call as you always run a discovery call.
Okay.
So let's do it. So hey, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Josh. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time. Now, I know that there were a couple of things that were picked up on when we spoke last week, very briefly. I know you were interested in learning more around mental health and how that could be implemented to your colleagues. Some mental health initiatives.
And stop. So let's end scene. I don't want you to start calls that way.
Yeah. I also don't start calls that way. You completely threw me. So.
Oh, you don't? So let's see how you really start a call. So beep, calls on, everyone's on. Boop.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining us today. So the reasons that I've completely lost it. So
that's okay, man. I know it's nerve-wracking. You're not used to role playing, and it's interesting, right? Because if we want to get better at anything in sports or anything, like Michael Jordan practices a bunch of times when he gets on the court, he's ready to shoot. Salespeople practice on their prospects. They practice on the court. It's weird. So we're not used to this, and it's perfectly normal. And if we ever worked together, what we would do on a bi-weekly basis is we would role play all this stuff. And what ends up happening when you role play is when you're at the free throw line, you make more shots. because you've practiced. And sales is a weird profession that way. We practice, we role play when we get onboarded, and then maybe once a week, and then AE's hardly ever. And how do you expect it to get good? Like, it's weird to me. So one of the things that's missing, and you're feeling this a little bit, is once you start to role play, once you start having the conversations, it's going to be easier. Like if you read interviews with all the greats, they're like, dude, when I'm on the court, it's easy because they bust their fucking ass off the court. Like in the prep, like when you watch a Broadway show, I don't know if you're into theater, it's like, oh my God, it's effortless. Well, dude, there's like they've been running those lines like a bunch of times. Michael Jordan's great. He knows, like, there's so many variables in basketball, but he's seen it all. He knows this, like he's able to, and that gives you the confidence. And when you don't role play, and you're kind of winging it, it's it's the equivalent of practicing on your prospects, which you're going to get hit or miss. Some people will close. The people that are going to close anyway, whether you suck or not. There's going to be people that will never close. But there's a shit ton of people that might close if you got better, a bunch. And that's the ones where you have the ability to be able to really increase your quota, like really light it up. And so a lot of times people get into this false sense of, well, I'm closing. I'm like, yeah, you're closing the layups, dude, which is fine. You're never going to close the nose. And what we're going to do is get rid of the nose really fucking fast, within about really fast. But what we are going to be able to do is close the maybes at a higher clip when we practice. So let's just try it again, because I want to give you something without preaching too much. So let's try to start our call again.
As a sports guy as well, put me on a football pitch, and I've been playing it for 20 years. I know most of the things that could happen, and you just
how do you know that?
Yeah, because you've been kicking a ball since I was able to walk, kind of thing.
Isn't it fucked up that sales isn't that way? Like, it's crazy. You want to get good at anything, you've practiced and you've role played and you've done stuff. In sales, it's like go do this thing. Maybe you got some onboarding, but there's no practicing. You want to get better at football, you practice like off the field. So what we're doing right now is going to be very new to you. If we work together, this would happen all the time. We would role play. And so what ends up happening, surprise, surprise, is that when you're in a situation, you're like, I know that play. I know how to run that. Josh burned that into me 7 times. He said they were going to say this, and now I know exactly what to say. Or, geez, something bumped in. I'm not exactly sure how to handle that. We listened to it like, oh, okay, let's work on that. So let's actually try it again. So, hey, how's it going?
Sure. Good. Thank you very much, Josh. Thanks a lot for joining us today. So just a quick refresher as to the purpose of the call. We provide virtual clinics to Canadian employers, and the benefit for you is that you're going to be able to...
Okay, stop. I'm going to give you something before we have to go off, because the framework that I teach and coach to has a three parts.
Yeah.
And I want you to, I'm just going to tell you about part one. Okay. So what we need to do very quickly as an account executive is we need to have an adult to adult conversation with someone. We need to know if they're going to buy or not, essentially.
Okay.
So when you start the conversation off, what I want you to do is something like this. So I'll start off. So hey, Bob, what I'd like to do today is ask you some questions. You'll probably have some questions for me too. And if there's a fit, we can continue the conversation. But if you're not feeling it, that's not a problem. Will you do me a favor? Will you fire me after this call so I don't have to chase you and hunt you down and send you 50,000 follow-ups? Can we agree to that? Is that fair? Sure, that sounds fair. Now, why did I do that?
You've given them an out, so you're not pushing them down an alley they don't want to be in. They know that if in 2 minutes' time this isn't where they want to be, they're not pressured. You've come across as genuine, but also you've put in the back of their mind what tends to happen, which is you'd have a call and then get hassled for 50,000 times. So
what I'm doing is I'm being fucking honest. Like, let's stop pretending that no one knows the game. You're here to make money today. And if it's not a fit, we want to be able to cut our losses and we want to be able to move on. So when you start the call, instead of going into the pitch, again, we don't know if the pitch is even relevant. We don't want to feel needy. Hey, Josh, here's what I'd like to do today, because you want to lead this. You want to be in control. I'm going to have some questions for you. You might have some questions for me. right? At the end, you can decide if it makes sense to move forward and to keep talking. But if not, and you're not feeling it, do me a favor. Just tell me you're not interested. Just fire me on this call. So I don't have to do that weird sales thing where I'm like emailing you and following you up and sending you weird stuff and GIFs and animated things in the mail. That's the last thing you need. Does that sound fair, John? Can we agree to that right now? Of course. Great. So let's actually role play that out. Let's just try it in your own. Now, what I don't want you to do is copy my words.
Yeah.
But I want you to get the idea of what that is. It's like, I'll have some questions for you. You'll have some questions for me. Not really sure if it's a fit, but if you do me a favor, you get rid of me. You can even use the word fire. Fire me is kind of funny. Can you fire me at the end of the call? And just so I don't have to go doing all this crazy stuff and pestering you and showing up at your house, at 6:30 at night, which I've been known to do.
Writing your letters. Yeah.
Have fun. I want you to have fun with it, because when people start to smile and laugh and you're looser, one thing's going to happen. They're going to be more honest. And all we want is the truth. I'm fine with the yes. I'm fine with the no. Maybe is not going to happen on any call I'm on. So if you were a prospective client of mine, at the end of the call, you're either signing. I have a pretty fast sales cycle. You're either committing or we're done. Now your sales cycle is longer. We can't do that. But what we can do is get a commit for a next step.
Commit for the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's actually try just that beginning part again. I want you to set up what I call just the agenda, the intro. So hey, this is Josh.
Hi, Josh. Dave here. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hey, no problem.
Josh, before we dig in, I just wanted to say a few words. You have the option to, so I'm starting with a negative there.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Again, it's role play. Hey, I'm going to have some questions for you. Hey, John, let me kick us off. We have 30 minutes. Does that still work for you? That's how you're going to start.
That's how I'm going to
30 minutes. Does it still work for you? Great.
So Josh, are you still available till past?
Yeah, that would work perfect.
Awesome. I will be sure to keep it within the time limit. So Josh, excuse the pun, company's called Dialogue. I would like a dialogue today. If you're able to share, the more you share, the more I'm going to be able to learn. The more I learn from you, the more I'm going to be able to share. At any stage, if this doesn't seem like a good fit for you, please be honest and tell me. I am a grown man. I would much prefer you're able to let me know, Dave, this isn't for me, because otherwise we'll end up in one of those silly scenarios where I'll end up chasing you and you'll end up ignoring me. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not for everybody. Does that sound fair?
Great. It's 50 fucking times better, buddy.
Yeah.
50 times better. I'll have some questions for you. You might have some questions for me. And we can decide if we want to go on a second date. You got it. So what I want you to do is just practice. The rest of it, there's a lot to talk about, obviously, and what happens after that. But hopefully this gives you a little taste of my style. And I think if you just practice that.
Yeah.
And because when from football, I can't practice everything. Like I'm a swimmer. Today I practiced putting my head in a certain position. That's all I worked on for an hour. If you work on just that one thing, and I want you to do that, role play it, and I want you to record yourself.
Yeah.
And I want you to just don't worry about the rest of your call, what you're saying, all that stuff. Like, don't beat yourself up.
Just the first bit.
Just the first bit. I loved how you just sounded right there. It was very natural. It was very you. I liked how you didn't copy my, what I was saying. And just I
was trying to, but it wasn't coming quick enough.
Okay. You don't want to copy. You want to get the idea.
Yeah.
I was in a real briefly. Did a workshop for like 300 people about a month or so ago, and I was talking about a technique, a humor technique called the Rule of Three. And the Rule of Three is a technique that's used by comedians where they say something expected, and then something unexpected. So for me,
the top of the bikini, the bottom of the bikini, and the blindfold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you read that from me?
Yeah, it's in one of your chapters.
Yeah, it's great, right? So I said, lead generation, improving conversations, or having a shot at tequila. And there was someone that raised their hand in the audience and said, I could never say tequila to my audience. And I kind of went back to the workshop and I said, remember what I said? If you're saying to yourself, this won't work for my audience, think, how can it work? And the idea here is that you don't want to take what I'm saying word for word. You want to take the idea of the triplet, not the alcohol. Yeah. So many people get caught up on, I could never say that word that Josh said. I could never say you could fire me. I don't want you to. I want you to get the idea. I'm not interested. That's what my wife said on our honeymoon. but let's keep it right. I mean, you got to be kind of loose about it. You know, you have to have fun with it. When you make a cold call, even, you know, it's, if I was cold calling you, I'd say, hey man, I think you got a problem. I'd be like, what? Yeah, dude, I think I got a big problem. And do you have conversations with people, like with customers? I don't know. Do I have that right? Yeah. So see, if it's an inbound lead, hey, why am I calling you? What? I don't know. I have your name in front of me, an email. Why am I calling you? It's something about, I don't know. Are you interested in some telemedicine thing? I don't know. What am I doing calling you? Rather than, hi, this is Max from Maximum. Would you mind if I took a minute of your time? You know, hi, I'm calling to see, did you get an ebook? Did you download the ebook? Is the ebook okay? Did you like the ebook? Did you get the white paper? Because like we talked about before, you're a white circle. And when you're a white circle, when you're like everybody else, this is a big takeaway, man. It's hard because everyone associates you with the mall kiosk person. Even though you're not like that, it's just a natural reaction. When I walk into a department store to go buy a shirt and someone says, can I help you? I'm like, no. I'm like, of course I'm going. I mean, there's a reason for me going in the store, but I say no because I don't want you to squirt lotion on my hands and I don't want to buy some shitty lotion that I don't want. So when we sound like all those people, can I ask you a question? Can I have a minute of your time? Can you download this white paper? We save you time and money. We help you attract and retain talent. They've heard that 1,000 times. Like you said, you told me. If I called you and said, I'm doing sales training, can I have a minute? It's like 1,000 times. So we got to be different. So what you just did in that agenda step was you sounded different. Most AEs aren't saying that. Most AEs are wanting like, what do you mean? Like he's going to let me just get off the phone and let me get fired and not going to chase me? Like that's refreshing. You know? And when we get into this more, if we decide to work together, you'll learn how we actually try to talk people out of talking to us. Because people buy for their reasons, not yours. And through a questioning techniques, and I've studied psychology, so most of the stuff that I read is on psychology and how people think. And I do therapy, you know, how psychologists learn how to do stuff. And so people buy for their reasons, not yours. So how do we get them to express their reasons? And then how do we use these techniques to amplify it? And this stuff could be used for evil. Like I can manipulate anybody into doing anything. I don't do it because I have integrity. But once you learn these techniques, they're very powerful. You'll watch some of the I Teach My Wife sales videos. The one I did with the South Carolina one. I'm going to South Carolina. I had to persuade my wife to move from Boca to South Carolina. If you watch that video, I think it's episode 8 or 9 on LinkedIn.
Okay. I
didn't say anything. I said, hey, why might you want to go to South Carolina? Well, I might want to do this. I might want to do that. I might want to do this. Scale of 1 to 10. Like 10 being you want to leave tonight. 1 being I got to pull you kicking and screaming. Where are you? Like a 3 or a 4. Why didn't you pick a lower number? Why such a high number? Well, I could do this. I could do that. I could do this. I could do that. And I'm starting to get her needs and desire. And meanwhile, if you watch that video, she's talking about 90% of the time at the end of like, what next step if you could take to do any, what you want to take? I know you mentioned that you wanted to volunteer at a hospital in the prenatal unit. Like what might you do next? She goes, well, I could go over there. I could go on websites. I could look for hospitals. You could see the energy, go see what's going on, find the baby, find which hospital. I love holding babies. What would that feel like to be able to rock a baby? Oh my God, it would be the greatest feeling. And all of a sudden she's picking up the phone the next day, making them like, people will tell you if you know the technique.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, enjoy the book, enjoy this. Hopefully this was helpful and practice it up, man. All right.
Yeah. Really helpful. Thanks a lot, Josh.
You got it. Have a good one, boss.
Catch you later, man.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.